I call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 117 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Natural Resources. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format. I would like to remind participants of the following points. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. All comments should be addressed through the chair. Members, please raise your hand if you wish to speak, whether participating in person or via Zoom. The clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best we can. And the folks that did raise their hand, I will relook at you to make sure I capture everybody and get you on the list. A quick housekeeping item before we commence. As previously mentioned, there has been a request to meet with a delegation from Vietnam on Wednesday, December 4th, for an informal meeting from 4:30 to 5:30 during our usual meeting time. If the committee wishes to proceed, can the clerk be given instruction to make the necessary arrangements for hospitality and defray the costs for the hospitality? Yes, I have. I'll go to Mr. Patzer and then at Mr. Angus after that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just curious. It's great there's a delegation coming from there, but which department, what members? Do we know that information yet? It's
far as, and maybe Mr. Clerk can add more, it's a parliamentary delegation from Vietnam who's got a keen interest in natural resources related work. But Mr. Clerk, if you'd like to add any more information on that.
Absolutely, thank you, Mr. Chair. We did email the committee late last week with the information, with names and some of their roles, but I can certainly pass that information again along by email.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Patzer. I'll go to you, Mr. Angus.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's always good to meet with international delegations to see if there's ways we can build trade and relations with Canada. My only question is it going to interfere with trying to finalize reports so that we actually get something?
Well, we're hoping if today's meeting, Mr. Angus, goes well. I have booked in the second hour for a V2 of a report. And I'm hoping to continue potentially on Wednesday if required, so we can continue to get on the important work that our committee's conducted over the last several months. But I'm also here at the will of the committee and moving forward because sometimes we do have motions that arise that we have to work through as well. So I'm hoping we have a successful meeting today, which will put us on a good path for the next meeting moving forward.
Chair, to be helpful and help with our international trade relations, could I just put for unanimous support to get my Asia Pulp and Paper study passed now, and then we could meet with the Vietnamese delegation and Mr. Samar's motion, and then we would feel that we are helping international relations and being very judicious with our time. So I'd put that on the table.
Well, I'm glad you brought that forward.
Seeking unanimous consent. Motion, so we would need direction as to.
So, Mr. Angus, you are on a point of order, and I understand that. I'm not sure if you're serious about unanimous grant on that, but you are on a point of order and are a point of clarification on the Vietnamese delegation. So I will say, when you get an opportunity later in the meeting, potentially, you can attempt that at that appropriate time. But I do appreciate it. So, colleagues, thank you for your support of having the Vietnamese delegation, and the clerk will make the necessary arrangements for Wednesday. Okay, when we adjourned the meeting on last Monday, we were debating the motion of Monsieur Simard and the amendment of Mr. Jawari. Ms. Stubbs was the next speaker on the list, and then I have Mr. Jawari. So I will go now to Mr. Jawari.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to welcome some of the colleagues across the aisle. It's good to see you in the Natural Resources Committee. I had the pleasure of working with them, a couple of other committees, which was great. just as a reference, first of all, I'm going to be short. It's not going to be more than 5 minutes to be able to get the last 2 points I wanted to get through. So I'm clearly trying to state that, this is not about what was perceived at the end of the last session to be a filibuster. So for the sake of some of the new members, there was a motion put in by Mr. Simard, and I made an amendment, and the amendment read as follows, that the Government of Canada provide a response to this report, i.e. the Trans Mountain Report, pursuant to Standing Order 109, which basically, first of all, forces the government to respond, so the government has to respond within 120 days, and then we will be in a position to have all the facts in support of this motion when it comes as a concurrence in the House. Therefore, as I had also committed that when I get up and intervene on that, I'll be in a strong position to be able to have answer to a lot of questions that it seems to be very relevant, and I was hoping to be able to get it as part of the government response, and that had to do with the number of the changes that we had, the gating of the process, what were the risks, how the risks were mitigated, and the mix on the financing model, etc. So that really dealt with the accountability, and I think I hope I had made my case that going into the House ahead of a report and only have focus on a very small piece of testimony that was provided by PBO will not position us to be able to have a very substantive and conversation within the spectrum of accountability. So that was it, and I just wanted to reiterate that. Then I said, well, okay, what is the timing? And that's where I'll be spending probably the next 3 or 4 minutes on, and I'll conclude. So why not wait? Why not complete the report, and why not wait 120 days? And what is the urgency, the sense of urgency that we need to get? So again, if we go back and look at the sense of urgency, is it that the government is planning to divest, or is there information that the government is planning to divest of this national investment in the near future? And we really need to have this debate. And if we have this debate, which is for 3 hours, which is as part of concurrence, how is it going to change anything? If the sense was that we need to really have this debate because the pipeline is about to be sold, or if we need to have this debate because there was not enough participation by, various groups, or others other points rather than PBO said that given the scope of my study and these criteria and these assumptions, if the divestment is done today, there is a possibility for the government not to recover the investment. And then the PBO also clarified that, hey, look, it's not that the Canadian will lose money, the Canadians are already making money. So I am also at loss, what is the urgency? And if the urgency is helping with the accountability, I would love to hear that. And, when I look at the runway that we have, had we dedicated, the last session and kind of getting the report drafted and then looking at it, would be much more ahead. So I'll conclude by saying that really on the accountability side, it would be strongly recommended that we adopt this motion, get the report done, get all the facts, get the response, let's have that substantive conversation, because if you accept, then we will have the concurrence no matter what. And hopefully the filibuster at the House finishes as well, it looks like. And then, you know what, there's the other side of it, there's going to be private, private member opposition day that we could look at. So on the timing, I'm confused. On the accountability, I'm confused. But I yield the floor back to you, Mr. Chair. Those are the points I wanted to make, and thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Jawari. I had next on the speaking list Mr. Drishan, and he is not here, so I'm going to go to Monsieur Simard, and this is the speaking order I had in place from last day, and then I will go to Mr. Lake after you, Monsieur Simard. Go ahead.
Well, I don't want to stretch the time unnecessarily, but I will just repeat what I said last week. I'm not in favor of my colleague's amendment because there will be no debate in the House. The PBO has indicated to us quite clearly that in the purchase or sale, there's going to be some net losses on the part of the government if sold. And he formulated the conclusions that the issues were more of a political nature. This is why I do want a debate in the House on this report or this issue and follow up and complete our report after the debate in the House. We have very few opportunities to discuss and debate situations with which we're faced now. It's a political issue. We've lost total control of a considerable sum of the taxpayers' dollars, and I'd be prepared to vote right now on this amendment. And I think that we will have lost the 3 hours of debate which occurred in the House. I think we're going to lose them here at the committee by questioning the issue of whether or not it will be debated in the House. Thank you, sir.
Monsieur Smart, we'll now go to Mr. Lake. Mr. Lake, you have the floor.
Yeah, I'm a guest in the committee, but of course this would be important in my constituency. I'm looking at the amendment, and I believe the effect would be to buy 4 months without debate in the House. And I just listened to it carefully. I mean, first of all, rarely do we see motions that bring members of all sides together, but hopefully we all in the House agree that it's insane that the Government of Canada had to buy a pipeline. Got itself in a position where it had to buy a pipeline, and I think we can all agree that what's happened since then has just been a cascading series of debacles and disasters economically. I think it absolutely warrants a debate in the House sooner than later. To my friend Majid's point, I've served on committee with Majid. He would know, even with his short experience in the House, that the second this motion was moved on November 18th, public servants were putting their papers together to prepare ministers and parliamentary secretaries and all Liberal members to have the opportunity to weigh in from a position of knowledge. I almost guarantee you that nothing will change between now and 4 months from now in terms of what is in the content of the choreographed series of speeches the Liberals will give in the House on this matter, and absolutely in opposition to this delaying amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Lake. I'll now go to Mr. Patzer. Mr. Patzer, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I too want to echo some of the thoughts of colleagues that I've heard around the table here this morning and also in previous meetings, in that this absolutely deserves a debate in the House sooner rather than later, and waiting for the report to come out and then, whatever will come after that. I think voting down this amendment and just passing the motion as it was originally written would make the most sense. It shows the seriousness that the House takes the issue of the government losing taxpayers' money. It shows the seriousness that the House should take on building resource projects, getting our resources to Tidewater, and the need for the private sector to be the one to do it, not the government. I think that there's so many different points that can and will be brought up in that debate. 3 hours hardly doesn't even seem like it'd be enough time, to be honest. But 3 hours is better than no hours, and having it happen sooner rather than later, meaning 4 months down the road from now, there's a lot that can happen between now and 4 months. So I think it'd be good to get this debate happening now, and I look forward to voting against this amendment and defeating it.
Thank you, Mr. Patzer. I'll now go to Ms. DeBrusen.
I just wanted to add, I actually, and from the beginning, have said I don't have a problem with us discussing this issue in the House. The question is whether we do it on the basis of just the PBO report or whether we allow the full study that's been done in this place at this committee to go to the House. And I think that the last two comments that have just been made exemplify exactly why we need the full report from this committee with all of the evidence that we heard from different witnesses to go before the House for the debate, because none of what they were talking about was actually what the PBO report includes. The PBO report's actually really quite narrow in its scope, the one that is being proposed to be sent to the House. The issues that were just raised by the last two speakers were actually the types of things that would be included in the full study with all the witness evidence that we had heard. So again, this isn't about do we or do we not have a debate about TMX in the House of Commons. It's do we have a debate in the House of Commons based on one of our witnesses and one report that will be included in the full study, or do we go ahead with the full study? Finish the report, put that to the House, and then let people argue whatever they want, plus for, pro, against, whatever. But you would at least be arguing it based on everything that we've heard, all of the witnesses who took their time to present to us, and all of the testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Bruson. I'll ask you to hold for a sec. We have a point of order from Mr. Lake. Mr.
Yeah,
Lake.
I just want to make sure the rules haven't changed. All of that witness testimony is public, is it not? And anybody speaking in the House could refer to it regardless? Just in case anything's changed in the way that we do things around this place in my 19 years.
19 years.
Thank you for your point of order, Mr. Lake. I'm not sure if it's a point of order from a procedural perspective, but I will answer your point of clarification on, and as you're new to the committee as well, welcome. I believe that testimony was public. So folks, but I don't believe that members of the public would have access to the physical approved report of the committee.
Access to the testimony, though, right?
They
the
would
testimony,
have,
everything the witnesses said, everything.
Yes, yes.
As Julie said, we heard as a committee.
So thank you for that point of clarification.
Okay.
Mr. Bruson,
Sure.
back to you.
So all I was saying, and I have said this since the very beginning, is I've never seen it done before where we decide to send one witness piece, one report piece that's been submitted as evidence to this committee in a larger study to the House of Commons without completing the full study. I still think that there's merit to it, and I just was pointing out that I think that the arguments that were just made before me, by the two speakers before me, kind of exemplify that there's an interest in actually digging deeper into the larger issues. So with that, I'm happy to go to a vote on Mr. Jahari's amendment, but I just wanted to make sure that that position was known.
Thank you, Mr. Bruson. We will get to a vote at some point, but we still have a few more speakers, and we have Mr. Falk, who's up next. Go ahead, Mr. Falk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for this time to speak to this amendment. I think it's clear, and I think Canadians can see what's going on here. The Liberal government is faced with an issue that the parliamentary budget officer says is going to become quite uncomfortable for them, because they've for years told Canadians that this pipeline is going to be a good thing. It's not going to cost them anything, and everybody will be made whole. And we know that from the parliamentary budget officer's report that he brought here, that is not the case, and that Canadians are on the hook for an awful lot of money, and that the likelihood of recovering the full cost of the TMX project is very small. And so to delay a debate in the House of Commons for another 4 months, I think would be unwise to do that. I think the sooner the House can debate the issue and dig a little deeper into the facts, I think, like my colleague Mr. Lake pointed out, this has been a public study. There's no new information in the report that Canadians haven't been able to to acquire through following the study. And I think the sooner the House can debate this issue fully and wholesomely, I think the sooner we can bring some kind of conclusion to this whole thing. And I think in reference to the study that this committee has done, I don't think it's been quite as fulsome a study as the Liberals would like to portray it has been. I think there's other voices that need to be heard. There's more information out there, and we still really haven't got to the root of exactly why all these cost overruns occurred on the pipeline. What should have been initially a $9.7 billion expansion project turned into an over $34 billion project. Like that's wild that you can go up a project is 7 times more expensive than what it was budgeted to be. And so there's obviously been some mishandling of the construction by this Liberal government. And I think Canadians will be very curious to follow the debate in the House of Commons, where I'm sure there will be new information that comes forward, and that Canadians are going to be in a better position to make an informed decision as to whether or not this government should have bought a pipeline and should have attempted to construct this pipeline in the manner in which they did. And I think you know what, once we have that debate in the House, I agree with Mr. Patzer. I don't think 3 hours is going to be enough time, even in the House, for this debate to adequately happen. And I think we need to defeat this amendment. I think the motion that my colleague Mario from the Bloc has brought forward is a great motion. And I think the sooner the House debates this, the better for Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Falk. At this point, I don't have, and I'm just taking one last glance at the screen for all those online. We don't have any other speakers. We will proceed to a vote. Mr. Clerk, if you could call the roll.
Working on the amendment?
On the amendment, yes. You need, do colleagues need clarification on the amendment? Or are we pretty clear on what the amendment is?
Clarify.
Yes, thank you for that, Mr. Aboutif.
Very well. Thank you, sir. The question is on the amendment. Ms. DeBruzen?
Yes.
Mr. Turnbull?
Yay.
Mr. Jahari?
Yes.
Madame Lapointe?
Oui.
Mr. Schiefke?
Oui.
Mr. Lake? No. Mr. Falk?
No.
Mr. Patzer?
Nope.
Mr. Aboutev?
No.
Mr. Simard? No. Mr. Angus?
No.
It's 5 yeas, 6 nays, defeated.
The amendment is defeated. Now we will proceed back to the main motion that has been previously amended. I will look to colleagues who want to speak on the main motion.
Ready to vote?
Oh, you're ready to vote. Okay. Yeah. Well, I like your enthusiasm and your you being prepared, Monsieur Smart. I just want to give colleagues an opportunity, a glance, before we proceed to a vote. Anybody online? No? Okay. Can Mr. Clerk? Oh, we have a hand. Go ahead, Ms. Lapointe. Ms. Lapointe, you have your hand up. Would you like to speak on the main motion?
I would like to present an amendment to the main motion.
Oh, okay. Well, you have the floor. Go ahead.
So the amendment that I'd like to propose involves the changing 4 last words in the motion. So en français, où ça dit que, et je vais à la fin de la résolution, où ça dit que...
In French, it indicates that we have to do it as soon as possible, the last 4 words. I would like to replace that with after.
The last 4 words that say as soon as possible. I'm proposing that we say following the conclusion of the committee's report on the Trans Mountain Pipeline. And the reason I'm moving this motion, it's been stated before. For me, there are two main reasons. One is a matter of process.
J'ai une question de règlement, Monsieur le Président.
Point of order, Chair. Point of order.
From Monsieur Simard.
Oui, je veux simplement m'assurer auprès.
I just want to ensure with the clerk that the motion or the amendment is in order, because it would have the same effect of the previous amendment tabled by Mr. Johari, which was rejected. And I think we will come to the same conclusion. Most of the MPs here have indicated that we should have a debate in the House as soon as possible, and I think that Madame Lapointe is trying to reframe Mr. Johari's argument, and I don't think that it would be relevant or proper to repeat the same arguments. I understand that the objective is very similar to what Mr. Johari has, which we rejected. So I don't know if it would be in order to even accept the amendment at this point.
As you asked a very specific question, Monsieur Simard, on your point of order, I'll let the clerk weigh in as it was directed to the clerk. Go ahead, Mr. Clerk.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. En français, Monsieur Simard. De mon avis,
well, in my opinion, Mr. Chair, I think the two proposals or amendments are separate and distinctly different. One was based on Standing Order 109, which reads that there will be a delay in having a report from in the House to allow debate in the House. But for Mr. Johari, we could table the motion immediately. So what has been suggested by Ms. Lapointe is that we will have that report in the House, but following the completion of the report on TMX. And yes, in a most agreeable time possible, but here we were asking to wait till the report, until the report is actually complete. In my opinion, of course, these are two separate and distinct amendments, and I would say that it is in order.
Monsieur Simard, I hope that clarifies for colleagues around the floor here the motion and the admissibility of it. Ms. Lapointe, you were in mid-sentence, so I'm going to go back to you.
Thank you, Chair. J'apprécie les commentaires.
I appreciate my colleagues' comments from Mr. Simard, and I think it's important to clarify and discuss those issues that have been raised this morning. The colleagues from the Conservative Party.
This is delay tactics and that we're avoiding having this come before the House. And I would suggest that just the opposite is the case. This is about ensuring that we have a fulsome debate in the House. And that really a fulsome debate can only happen if we include all of the testimony that we heard rather than just hearing testimony from one specific witness. The purpose of the TMX study was that we've been working on actually since September is to hear from the experts and to make recommendations to the government. We've heard from witnesses, and it's important that we not be seen as a committee as disregarding their very important and valuable testimony. They provided expertise on a number of fronts. We heard from witnesses who talked to us
Ms. Lapointe, I do have another point of order from Mr. Lake. Mr. Lake, on the point of order.
Again, just to be clear, the witnesses have been heard from. That testimony is all public, and this is clearly a delay tactic on behalf of the government. We're in a public meeting right now. Anybody watching this meeting, which I'm sure will make sure more people see it, will see that there's a public discussion wherein the Liberal members are very clearly and repeatedly trying to delay a debate about this important issue in the House of Commons.
Mr. Lake, on your point of order, this was addressed earlier, and you are now engaging in debate. I do have you actually on the list after Ms. Lapointe, so you can make the same points that you're making on the point of order, but when you have the opportunity to debate. But I would like to let you know, yes, and just to let you, from your question again, this was a public meeting. This information has been provided or is accessible for the members of the public, but the final report and recommendations have not been approved by this committee at this point. We have not gone through that process. So just from a procedural understanding of where we are, that's kind of where we're at.
Perfect.
So thank you for your point of order, or your point of clarification, I will say, and I look forward to your debate as you're up next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Lapointe, I'm going to go back to you. Go ahead.
Thank you for providing that clarification, Chair. And again, I'm going to repeat that this is about ensuring that the witnesses we brought forward that had expertise on a number of fronts be included and that the report be before us when we go to the House. Some of the witnesses spoke to us about economy, the safety, the Indigenous community impacts as well. And I would suggest that as a committee, when we all agreed to taking on this study, what we wanted was to hold the government to account. And the report will provide that more fulsome and thorough review with all of the witnesses' testimony, as well as the recommendations that may ensue from that report. The final point that I will make, and I know that my colleague MP de Brussen made it, but I think it's important again because I did start by saying that process is important. Every report this committee has made since the beginning of this session required the Government of Canada to table the reports. It is the accepted process that has been adopted by this committee and other committees. And some of the reports that we've seen in where this occurred is the climate crisis in Canada's energy sector, a number of reports that we know, the fair and equitable energy transformation. There are many, many others. So again, I would conclude by saying that in terms of process, I think it is important that we follow that due process. In terms of accountability and ensuring a good and fulsome debate, that we do that with the full range of witnesses and testimony that we heard. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Lapointe. I'm going to go to the next speaker on our list, and that's Monsieur Samad on the amendment.
Bon, moi
Well, I will tell you quite frankly that I could vote right now, but the arguments that have been provided by Mrs. Lapointe were very much along the same lines as that presented by Mr. Johari. The committee indicated that they would not accept his amendment, and the use of a pretext that they want a complete, comprehensive report before we debate it in the House. All the members of this committee were present in the presentation of our witnesses, and if we want to do a serious job, we have to have mention of some conclusions as to what would happen with the sale of this corporation. The amendment is quite repetitive and redundant. I mean, we can, chew gum and walk at the same time. We can have a complete report after the debate in the House. We could do one or the other, but I would invite my Liberal colleagues to be a little bit more courageous and to face head-on what was going to be said in the House. I'd like to go immediately to vote on the motion.
Mr. Samard, we do have another speaker on the list, and then we'll try to get to a vote. Mr. Angus.
Thank you. I am very concerned by what I think is a clear pattern from my Liberal colleagues to filibuster this motion and to keep us from presenting to Parliament the findings of the Parliamentary Budget Officer. I have a number of concerns, and it was one of the reasons I pushed for a study of TMX, because I think it speaks to the underlying falsehood of the Prime Minister's promise to Canadians and the Prime Minister's promise to the world. We remember the Prime Minister at COP26 coming and saying Canada's back, that we were going to be an environmental leader. And he had no intention ever of following through on that. We have had the Environment Commissioner, Mr. DeMarco, come before our committee and say that Canada has missed every single target. It is established under this Prime Minister that we are now the outlier of the G7. Canada is now leading the world in increased oil production while they tell us that they are going to address increasing emissions. They regularly, and Mr. Guilbeault regularly makes repeated falsehoods that we're bending the curve on emissions. Well, we are somewhat bending a very tiny bit of a curve, except when it comes to the oil sector. And yet this is where the government has decided to invest their money. It's been 2 years since they promised action on the clean energy file, and yet through that time, Cenovus, Imperial, anything that they needed in terms of money for the bogus carbon capture schemes, government was there for. The $34 billion TMX pipeline, which had no financial case, they were there for. We have seen under this Prime Minister oil production increase 41% over what happened under Stephen Harper. And why does that matter? It matters because what we know from the IPCC is that every increase in carbon at this point is putting us closer and closer to a dangerous red line from which we don't return. What I've found in this Parliament is that climate denialism is deeply embedded. It's certainly deeply embedded in my colleagues in the Conservative Party, but it's much more concerning to have nice climate denialism. The climate denialism of the Liberals who tell us that, yes, we can massively increase unrefined bitumen exports around the world, but we won't count it as part of our inventory, as though somehow the world won't notice the increased, that Cenovus is going to go from 800,000 to 950,000 barrels of unrefined bitumen a day, that if they burn that in the United States or Malaysia or China, that won't affect the atmosphere, that Imperial Oil production levels 3% increase just this past February, saying that they are now at the highest production levels ever. So the Prime Minister went to COP. He made promises. He made promises of an emissions cap, which is a ridiculous suggestion if you're going to massively increase production and then say you're going to put an emissions cap. It's part of the Liberal government's don't worry, trust us. We're going to get behind the wheel and drive and drink our way to sobriety, and you can trust that we'll be safe on the highway. This is not environmental stewardship. So I think what we're seeing with the issue of the PBO report, I have a number of concerns about the PBO report. I think it was overly optimistic. I think he ignored a number of key factors. Such as changing the net present value to present value, which basically wiped out the massive debt. What Canadians want to know is who's going to pay to get us whole again after the $34 billion. We had the Deputy Prime Minister come and tell our committee that, yes, all that $34 billion is going to get paid back and more. She was going to make money off it. That was either an open falsehood or she hadn't looked at the numbers. But the parliamentary budget officer, even though I believe he has overly optimistic scenarios, says that that's impossible and we are going to lose money. So the issue before us is Mr. Simard has brought a motion saying we should present the PBO's report to Parliament. That's reasonable. Normally, I would suggest that it's reasonable to do it within a larger study. I get that. But the TMX is not a normal study. The TMX was not a normal investment. The TMX investment was this Prime Minister going all in on betting on oil infrastructure when the International Energy Agency was saying, do not do this, when the IPCC was saying, do not invest in this kind of infrastructure. This is the Prime Minister's legacy project, a legacy that will impact Canadians for generations to come. So it deserves to be brought to Parliament, as well as a full study with all the witnesses. They don't preclude one another. They don't erase one another. But what is being erased here is our ability to get our reports done because the Liberals are filibustering. They're filibustering because they don't want the issue of TMX to be brought to the House. So I reject this attempt to continue to obstruct this this effort on our committee's part to bring the PBO report to Parliament so parliamentarians can discuss it. I reject the filibustering, and I reject the falsehoods of a Prime Minister who promised to be an environmental leader while Canada is now the laggard of the G7 while our planet burns.
Thank you, Mr. Angus. I'm going to go to Ms. DeBrusen.
Actually, I was originally just going to let it go to a vote, but I feel like there are a few things that I had to respond to that one. And you know what? It might be really hard to see from the inside of a Maserati as we drive down that highway, but things are changing in Canada. And in fact, I appreciate that. But so we are actually seeing our emissions going down as a country. There was the most recent report from the Climate Institute that supports that, but it was also our own inventory report to the IPCC that said the same thing. Under the previous Conservative government, our emissions were going up and there was no tracking down on them. Now they are bending down, and we are continuing to do the heavy lifting to make that happen. Our emissions are actually lower than they have been in 25 years, and that's a huge move forward. So I could respond to a whole bunch of things that the member opposite, Mr. Angus, just said, but I don't want us to take too much more time before we get to this vote, except for just to say that he was incorrect about the emissions. They are going down. And to say that there is, in fact, a lot of work that's happening, including the cap on emissions from oil and gas, including the work that we've done with carbon pricing, which his leader has chosen to step away from. An interesting choice, but again, maybe it's because it's become expensive for him with his choice of vehicle. So on that point, I will say let's go to a vote.
Okay, well, we will go to a vote soon, but we have a few more speakers. I'm going to go to, we have 3 more speakers. I'm going to go to Monsieur Smart, Ms. Gray, and then Mr. Patzer. Monsieur Smart, you have the floor.
Thank you. Well, to come back to what my colleague Charlie Angus has just said, I don't drive a Maserati. I have a Hyundai. So make of that what you will. Nonetheless, I share the analysis that Charlie presented. The PBO told us that not only is significant amounts will not be recoverable, we have to take a look at the market conditions at the time of any proposed sale to even find a part of its investment. Well, as it goes, we've been prisoners to the petroleum sector for over 40 years, and if we want to maintain our target as being under 1.5 degrees Celsius, we have to reduce our consumption by 50%, 62% actually. Despite any CCUC, we have to then reduce it by 70%. And that doesn't correspond to the creation of a pipeline over a course of 40 years. I think it would be essential for us to have this debate in the House. That's it. Thank you.
Mr. Smart, I will now go to Ms. Gray. Ms. Gray, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And with respect to the original motion, this is an important motion, and it's good that this is brought forward. The statements from the parliamentary budget officer was very revealing and really needs to be discussed in the House. The amendment that has been brought forth here by the Liberals, it's a continual trend that they have of wanting to not address the serious issues and to sort of push things under the rug. They're, filibustering this rather than just voting for a good motion that we should be able to move forward with really quickly. So bringing forth these ongoing amendments is, without just looking at the original motion. I mean, one thing with the original motion that is solid is that it's right to the point, and it's something that that all parties will be able to speak to carefully and address. So it's unfortunate that the Liberals keep bringing forth these amendments in order to shut down the opportunity to just move forward with this good motion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Gray. I'll now go to Mr. Patzer. Mr. Patzer, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I just want to add a few thoughts to this as well. I think it's quite clear. I think Charlie was correct that the government is clearly trying to filibuster. They don't want to have their failures on Trans Mountain Pipeline brought up in the House of Commons, and that's why they're trying to kick this down the road as far as they possibly can and just hope and hope and hope that maybe something happens, like, I don't know, maybe an election that would prevent it from happening, or maybe they want to prorogue Parliament. Maybe that'd be something that would happen as well, too. Who knows? But we know that the clear stated objective here is to delay this motion as long as they possibly can. So my hope is that we can get to the point where we just pass the original, well, the original motion, I guess, as it was written, or as we have it before us anyway, without any further amendment. Because I think when you look at the cost that's tied onto this, $34 billion, I mean, the PBO was pretty clear. And I mean, it's not the first time that a committee has requested a parliamentary budget officer's report to be concurred in prior to a committee study being finished. We see this every now and then from different committees, and this report's a pretty substantive report, right? And anytime you're talking about $34 billion, I mean, that's enough of a report in and of itself, and if the parliamentary budget officer has made the case that the government stands to take a loss to it, that should be a 5-alarm fire for everybody, regardless of their feelings. So I absolutely think that having a debate as soon as we can get one on the government's handling of the pipeline and the finances of it as per the PBO report, I mean, we should be doing that. I mean, I'd like to see that tomorrow if we could. I know that's not going to happen, but that's the kind of urgency that we should see with this. And I would think the government would want to get up and speak to it as well, too, as soon as possible, not want to wait 120 days. Because I think for them it would be urgent to try to build confidence with Canadians. And I think the fact that they want to kick it down the road shows just how, scared they are, really, to have that debate. And they know that they can't defend their record on it because they know that it's been an absolute failure, even just on the financial side, let alone other issues here. So, so I'm ready to vote, and I hope we can just pass the original motion.
Okay, Mr. Patzer, if you're ready, I think colleagues on committee might be ready too. I'm looking for any last hands, one last glance around the horseshoe here and online, nothing. Okay, well, let's vote. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Again, on the amendment.
On the amendment of Ms. Lapointe. Thank you for that, Mr. Abeltif. That's on the amendment of that Ms. Lapointe brought forward. Are we all clear on what we're voting on? Please call the rolls.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The question is on the amendment. Ms. Bruson?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Johari?
Yes.
Madame Lapointe?
Oui.
Monsieur Shifki?
Oui.
Mr. Falk? No. Ms. Gray?
No.
Mr. Patzer?
No.
Monsieur Boutev?
No.
Monsieur Simon?
No.
Mr. Angus?
No.
That's 5 yeas, 6 nays. Defeated.
The amendment is defeated. Okay, so we are now back on the main motion that was previously amended. And I'm gonna, I don't have anybody on the speaking order at this point, but I am gonna take a glance across the room, and once I look across the room, I will eventually look online. Okay, Mr. Bruson, I'll recognize you. And I'm looking at folks online as well. So, Mr. Bruson. No? Oh, no?
No, I'll just be really super quick.
Okay.
I just wanted to clarify that I think I've been clear in every intervention that I've had that I have no problem with debating our record on this in the House of Commons. My issue has been the process and not having to study go forward. But at no time has it been to not actually have the issue at large discussed. So I still don't like the way this is going forward, and I do still think that we should have the complete study with our recommendations rather than just the PBO report, which is just one piece of evidence that came to us. But on that, I'm happy to go to a vote.
Thank you, Mr. Bruson. Before we get to a vote, we have some additional speakers. We have Mr. Angus. Go ahead, Mr. Angus.
Thank you, Chair. I think it is just really important for the record that this does not preclude the other, because the parliamentary budget officer is not just a witness. I would think it'd be very uncommon or questionable if we said we liked one witness and wanted their testimony brought to the House of Parliament, but the Parliament budget officer reports to Parliament. That's their job. So this is a different factor in comparison with a professor or somebody from a company or an NGO that we would try and extract testimony from the study. So it's a simple thing where we asked Parliament to reflect on the report of the parliamentary budget officer. Then there will be the full report with all the witness testimony, and that's really important, I think, for the public to know.
Thank you, Mr. Angus. Did you ever hand up, Mr. Smart? No? Okay. You were just raising your hands and enjoying excitement. All right, colleagues, one last glance, a very quick glance, and Monsieur Abouteif, you're going to ask me if we're voting on the main motion that was previously amended. I think everybody's clear, and if you're not, we can read it into the record once, but if you are clear, we will proceed to a vote. Yes? Okay. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The question is on the motion of Mr. Simard. Mr. Bruson?
No.
Ms. Jones?
No.
Mr. Johari? No. Madame Lapointe?
No.
Mr. Schiefke?
No.
Mr. Falk?
Yes.
Ms. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Patzer?
Yes.
Mr. Abouteif?
Yes.
Monsieur Simard?
Oui.
Mr. Angus?
Yes.
6 yeas, 5 nays. Adopted. Carried.
Okay, that is carried. I have Monsieur Abouteif, and then I'm going to go to you, Mr. Angus. Go ahead, Monsieur Abouteif.
Thank you, Chair.
We can let Charlie do his first.
Pardon?
We can let Charlie do his. Well, go ahead.
Yeah. I just want to move a motion on behalf of my colleague, Ms. Stubb. The motion, give the government's draft regulations for an emissions cap on the oil and gas sector. The committee conduct a study, and the following witnesses be invited to appear separately for at least an hour each. 1, the Minister of Energy and Natural Resources. 2, the Minister of Environment and Climate Change. 3rd, the Minister of Labor and Seniors. And that other witnesses be invited to appear as submitted by members of the committee. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Monsieur Abouteif, for your moving a motion. And I'm going to get hands up here. I'm going to go to Mr. Bruson, then I'll go to you, Mr. Angus.
On this one, I support the motion, but I would propose an amendment to remove the Minister of Labor and Seniors from the study list. I'm not really sure how he frames into this conversation. So I would support this study, but
Randy.
I don't know if you need specific wording for the amendment I move, or
She's just removing it?
sorry, Mr. Bruson, can you just clarify what you were just saying once again? Because there was a lot of chatter, and I just want to make sure that it's clear.
That's why I just wanted to be clear. So my amendment that I'm proposing is to remove Minister of Labor and seniors from the witness list.
Other Randy.
Okay, so we have an amendment by Mr. Bruson on a deletion. I'm going to go to Mr. Angus. Go ahead, Mr. Angus.
I agree with my colleague.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Angus. And I see some nodding heads in agreement. Mr. Patzer, go ahead.
I just want to just quickly say the reason why the labor minister would be of utmost importance is that we have seen various groups come out and talk about reports that have been done. There's the Business Council, there was Deloitte, there was another one or two that have done it, and they've talked about the potential for tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands of jobs lost because of an emissions cap, which would be ultimately a production cap. And to get the labor minister, whenever there is one appointed here to talk about it, assuming that Randy is no longer, has there been one appointed?
Labor?
Sorry, or did I got the wrong? Oh, he is workforce development. Okay, my mistake there. My mistake. I thought Randy was my mistake. Anyways, the other Randy. There we go. But my point being that having the labor minister come and talk about the impact of jobs that that the emissions cap would have, because there are multiple reports out there talking about how devastating it will be to employment in the country. I think it shows that it would be absolutely important to have the labor minister come and talk about it. Thanks.
Okay. We have Mr. Bruson's amendment on the deletion. I don't see any other speakers looking to speak, so we will proceed to a vote. Is it clear for everyone what we're voting on? That's deleting the line of the Minister of Labor and Seniors. Okay, Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The question is on the amendment of Ms. DeBruson. Ms. DeBruson?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Johari?
Yes.
Madame Lapointe?
Oui.
Mr. Shifke?
Oui.
Mr. Falk?
No.
Ms. Gray?
No.
Mr. Patzer?
No.
Mr. Abouteif?
No.
Mr. Simard?
Oui.
And Mr. Angus?
Yes.
It carries.
Okay, colleagues, that carries. The amendment carries. We'll now go back to the main motion. Do we have any speakers on the main motion as amended? Scanning. No. Okay, well, we'll be voting on the main motion. Mr. Clerk, once you're ready, please call the roll.
Do you want a recorded vote, sir? Is that necessary?
Do we want a recorded vote? May as well. Yeah, okay. Thank you. Thanks for thinking of me.
The question is on the motion of Mr. Abouteif as amended. Ms. DeBruson?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Johari?
Yes.
Madame Lapointe?
Oui.
Mr. Shifke?
Oui.
Mr. Falk?
Yes.
Ms. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Patzer?
Yes.
Mr. Abouteif?
Sure.
Mr. Simard?
Oui.
Mr. Angus?
Yes.
Unanimous. Yes, carried.
Okay, that's carried unanimous. So that motion passes. I'll go to you, Mr. Angus.
Thank you, Chair. I want to bring up committee business that has been an open file and unfinished business. We do remember that we had asked Mr. Jackson Wajea to come testify about his takeover of multiple Canadian mills, and he refused to testify, which I find very concerning. Just this past month, we learned through the European anti-monopoly regulators that Mr. Wajea's group, the Paper Excellence, admitted that they were Asia Pulp and Paper Company. They admitted that to European regulators, but they told the Canadian government that there was absolutely no connection whatsoever between Paper Excellence, which took control of Domtar, Northern Pulp and Paper, Resolute, and other mills, and they claimed there was no connection between Asia Pulp and Paper and this new entity that they'd created, Paper Excellence, and we know now that that was false. So I think it's incumbent that our committee send another invite for Mr. Wajea to come testify, including a subpoena if necessary, that we bring forward officials who had investigated and assured us about Asia Pulp and Paper not being connected with Paper Excellence. Why is this important? Well, Asia Pulp and Paper have a notorious environmental track record. I don't think anyone would have opened the door to Asia Pulp and Paper coming in, or the Wajea family coming in to take over Canadian forestry operations if it was known that they were Asia Pulp and Paper. So hence the creation of Paper Excellence as the Trojan horse to get into Canada. But what's concerning is that the track record and the paper trail of the connection of Asia Pulp and Paper to the Wajeas was so clear from the beginning. We need to know how they were able to hoodwink Canadian officials and get control of our mills. I'm not going to go into this for too long, but so, you know, what do we know? Well, at the height of it is a group called Sinar Mas, which is entirely controlled by the Wajea family. Asia Pulp and Paper was founded by Ika Wajea under Sinar Mas. This Asia Pulp and Paper China Company is situated in the White Magnolia Plaza in Shanghai in a building known as the Sinar Mas Plaza. We know that Jackson Wajea, one of the key members of the Wajea clan, established their Canadian presence through Paper Excellence, and that when they were being set up, they received a bank loan at an extremely low rate of 0.1% from a Chinese bank controlled by the Wajea family. This should have set off alarm bells from the beginning about financing from Chinese authorities for Canadian natural resources. But there are many other serious concerns being raised. Mac Anderson from Mackenzie Fibre testified to the BC Legislative Committee that, quote, Paper Excellence is owned by a company called Sinar Mas. And then he said further that the guys at Shanghai were reviewing what I was doing. How is it possible that Paper Excellence, now they're calling themselves Domtar again, can claim to be a Canadian company if we have employees who said that they were being directed by Shanghai operations over Canadian pulp and paper operations? There was, according to media reports, the former manager at the APP Shanghai office who described the expansion into Canada as a, quote, fiber grab. He said they want to keep the perception that Paper Excellence is an asset for Canada, of Canada, for Canada, and by Canada, but in reality it is a feeder for the Chinese machine. We need to know our mills, some of which have been shut down, some of which have faced environmental penalties since they were taken over by Paper Excellence. Are they being managed for the good and the interests of Canadian operations, or as feeders for the Chinese machine? The Halifax Examiner also raised serious questions that their Paper Excellence headquarters in Richmond, British Columbia were not where decisions were being made, but at the APP offices in Shanghai. So that at that point there was a direct link between APP controlling our mills, and yet we had Minister Champagne, we had his staff tell us that they couldn't find any connection whatsoever. So this is either the ultimate example of Canadian officials being hoodwinked, or they didn't want to know the connection. But we need to know that connection, because Sinar Mas and Asia Pulp and Paper have a long list of allegations of environmental damage. There have been massive international campaigns against APP because of the massive burnings in Indonesia and destructions of their peat ecosystems and the loss of their forestry sustainable the FSC forestry certification licenses under APP. We don't need that kind of negative corporate track record when it comes to Canada's mills. We want to have the highest standards, and we want to know that the people who are running our mills are willing to maintain that highest standards. So I have brought forward a motion that I'd like to read into the record, that in light of recent reports that Jackson Wijaya and Paper Excellence are about to take control of Asia Pulp and Paper, APP, and given that the Paper Excellence and the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry assured this committee there is no connection between Paper Excellence and Asia Pulp and Paper, at the discretion of the Chair and within 10 days of the passage of this motion, the committee called Jackson Wijaya, the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry, and representatives from the International Forest Stewardship Council to testify in regard to the impact of such a takeover and whether the control of 22 million hectares of Canadian forests and multiple dependent mill towns by Asia Pulp and Paper represents a, quote, net benefit to Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Angus. I'll now go to Ms. DeBrusen.
Thank you. And I actually think it's a good idea to have Mr. Wijaya come and speak, so I'm happy to do that, but I was going to propose an amendment that we remove within 10 days of the passage of the motion to as soon as possible. The only reason I'm suggesting that is that I wouldn't want Mr. Wijaya to be able to say, oh, wasn't able to come within 10 days, and then that's the wiggle room to not appear. So, you know, within 10 days of passage of motion would be great, but I think that it would be better if we leave it to as soon as possible so that we don't give that kind of wiggle room.
Okay, Mr. Angus, go ahead.
I appreciate that, and I'm certainly open to that discussion, but I'm wondering if in the reading of the interpretation that it could be that within 10 days we're asking the chair to issue this call to him, that we're not expecting that he's going to show up here by December 22nd, but that you will initiate this process immediately to start calling him.
Okay.
So that would be and then you would come back and tell us when he's available. So.
Okay. Go ahead. Back to you, Mr. Bruson.
Do we need to change anything in the wording of the motion? I agree with what Mr. Angus has just proposed. Does something need to be changed to the wording in the terms
That's
of my
how we
amendment?
interpreted it, so I would turn it over to the clerk to see if the way we wrote it wasn't clear enough.
We'll just take a moment for the clerk to review. I'll actually just suspend for a moment. Okay, so we do have a motion on the floor with an amendment, but I'm going to go back to you, Mr. Bruson, on the amendment.
I think that I've had the clarification that I need, and from hearing what Mr. Angus, the way he described it, that I'm happy to withdraw my amendment.
Okay, very good. So colleagues, we have a motion on the floor brought forward by Mr. Angus. I'm going to look across the room, which I'm looking. I don't see any further hands up, which means we will proceed. Oh, okay, Mr. Falk.
Yeah, I won't take a lot of your time, but just reading the motion, there's no date that's been specified as to when we would like to see these representatives. Is that intentional, Charlie, or is that, did you have something in mind? Through you, Chair.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Falk. I will go to Mr. Angus.
Well, thank you. Yes, what was intentional was that the chair reach out to Mr. Wajea, and we have gone through this before where we reach out, and the process is you ask them politely. Then Mr. Wajea said he was too busy to talk to Canadian parliamentarians about our Canadian operations. We were going to follow up then with the summons, but then we got caught up with other business. So I think the chair should come back to us, and clerk can back to us and say, are they willing to meet? How soon can they meet? And then if we have questions about them delaying that, there are further steps we can take. But the first step is for the chair to reach out. Of course, I invite Mr. Champagne any day of the week. I'd like to see him here. So, but I don't know if we need to. I trust the chair on that.
Thank you. Okay, well, let's proceed to a vote. Mr. Clerk, can you please call the roll?
The question is on the motion of Mr. Angus. Ms. DeBruson?
Yes.
Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Jahouri?
Yes.
Madame Lapointe?
Oui.
Mr. Schiefke?
Oui.
Mr. Falk?
Yes.
Ms. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Patzer?
Yep.
Mr. Abou-Taif?
Yes.
Monsieur Simard?
Oui.
Mr. Angus?
Yes.
Unanimous carries.
That carries unanimously, and I will now go to Mr. Bruson.
I believe that we had saved the time for the second half of this meeting to be doing some report studying, so I moved to another order of business so that we may move in camera.
I don't see any objections to that, so we have consent to do so. So we will now move into camera, and we will suspend for the transition. It may take about 10 minutes. We're suspended. you.